Hello everyone, welcome to 90-Day News Hub. Watch the full video for the latest shocking updates. She stood up in the middle of the room, hands shaking but voice clear, and said the words no one expected to hear. I'm leaving. Not maybe. Not need space. Not. We'll talk later. Jenny didn't flinch. Didn't wait for Sumit to speak. Didn't even look at his mother. The room froze. Sadhna smirked. Didn't move. The brother didn't blink. And Sumit, his jaw locked. His chest barely moved. It was the kind of silence that screamed something had been coming for a long time. And everyone in that house knew it. The problem was no one expected Jenny to be the one to finally it out. You're watching Drama Live. I'm Sabrina. Hit subscribe and tell us in the comments, should Jenny have walked out for good that day, or did she just hand her power back to the same people who never wanted her there to begin with? What made this moment even colder was that it didn't come after a blow-up or some huge betrayal. It happened during what was supposed to be a routine family meeting about the Café. But that's the thing about control. It never explodes all at once. It leaks into the small stuff. Who stands? Who speaks? Who apologizes first? Jenny knew what this meeting was. It wasn't a business update. It was a cornering, calculated group confrontation where the real message was, you either fall in line or you're in the way. And Sumit calculated group confrontation where the real message was, you either fall in line or you're in the way. And Sumit didn't protect her. He didn't interrupt his mother when she raised her voice. He didn't stop his brother when he nodded along. He didn't move when Jenny stood. That was the moment she realized he wasn't frozen. He was fine. Because for him, this was progress, a united family, shared goals, a working system. For Jenny, it was a trap. One where love came second, and loyalty came with conditions she never agreed to. When the person you married lets the room turn on you and calls it family bonding, you don't need to argue. You already lost. This wasn't the first time Jenny felt outnumbered. But this time it felt different. She didn't cry. She didn't fight back. She didn't beg to be heard. She walked out because she had nothing left to say. And Sumit, still sitting at the table, didn't chase her. He looked around the room like someone trying to calculate damage. Not to his wife, but to his plan. That's what this was all along. A plan. Get the family back under one roof. Launch the Café. Rebuild his image. Use Jenny's patience as currency. But when a woman reaches her limit, no blueprint survives. What Sumit saw as unity, Jenny experienced as suffocation. And when your survival becomes someone else's inconvenience, something breaks. She didn't slam the door. She didn't make a scene. She just left quietly, which is the worst kind of goodbye because it means she wasn't trying to change anything anymore. She was done trying, done translating her pain into something palatable, done waiting for the version of Sumit that used to stand up for her instead of hiding behind the excuse of culture and tradition. And when silence follows betrayal, that's not peace. It's distance. You could see it on her face before she even said a word. The tension wasn't new. The glances, the fake smiles, the way Sumit spoke in third person about her like she wasn't in the room. It was all building, but Jenny had reached the stage where heartbreak isn't loud, it's focused. She was watching everyone carefully, not emotionally. That's when people are the most dangerous. When they stop trying to belong and start choosing themselves. Sadhna knew it, too. You could see it in her eyes. She didn't speak, but her silence was approval. Her goal was never peace. It was power. And power doesn't need to win arguments. It only needs the target to leave. That's exactly what Jenny did. And in that moment, Sadhna won. Or did she? Because as Jenny walked out, something shifted. The brother looked uncomfortable. The sister-in-law didn't speak. And Sumit, still silent, finally stood. But it was too late. You don't get to rebuild trust once you've treated your partner like collateral. And now, for the first time, he was seeing what losing her would actually feel like. Not a fight, not a breakup, just absence. And here's the question. Why did Sumit bring her back into this house in the first place? After everything they'd survived, after years of fighting for their right to be together, what kind of man brings his wife back into the very environment that almost destroyed her the first time? Was this ever about love? Or was Jenny always just a placeholder in a plan that never had her name on it? Was this ever about love? Or was Jenny always just a placeholder in a plan that never had her name on it? It started small, a suggestion here, a soft push there. Sumit didn't wake up one day and drag Jenny back into his parents' house. He eased her into it like you ease someone into quicksand, slowly, gently, smiling the whole time. He told her it was temporary, that they were only staying with his parents until the calf was off the ground. He framed it like a team decision, but every step was already mapped out in his head. And Jenny, trusting him again, walked right into it. He said they couldn't afford a separate apartment yet. That his family needed them to be close to make the business work. That the calf wasn't just a dream, was a legacy. The kind of thing that could finally stitch the family back together. But every time he talked about the plan, Jenny noticed something strange. His language changed depending on who was in the room. With her, he said we. With his mother, it became they. And when Sadhna entered a room, the tone in his voice dropped. The edge softened, his volume lowered like a man shifting from husband to son. Jenny saw it. She didn't say anything at first because she wanted to believe the best. She always does. But deep down, she felt that chill return. The same one she felt years ago when Sumit was lying about his first marriage, when he said he'd protect her and then disappeared behind closed doors with his family, leaving her out front to face the storm alone. And once you've had to beg the person you love to choose you more than once, you don't miss the signs when they start slipping again. The story on camera was about the calf. But the real story, it was about control. Sumit didn't want to run a restaurant. He wanted to run back to the version of life that made him feel like good son again. And to do that, he needed Jenny to quietly sacrifice every boundary she'd ever set. Her privacy, her freedom, her dignity. What he framed as unity was actually obedience. What he called compromise was submission. And the moment Jenny started pushing back, Sadhna didn't have to say a word. Her look said enough, because this was never about business. Was always about testing Jenny's loyalty. Again, Sadhna knows her son. She knows how to tug at his guilt and frame it as duty. Every time she criticizes Jenny, she does it in front of others, then pretends it's concern. She doesn't shout. She uses disappointment as a weapon. She sigh. She tells Sumi she's worried that Jenny doesn't respect the family. That things were better before she stood up in the middle of the room, hands shaking, voice calm, and said the sentence nobody in that house was ready to hear. I'm leaving. Not maybe. Not I need space. Not we'll talk later. Just leaving. Jenny didn't flinch. She didn't wait for Sumit. Speak. She didn't even look at his mother. The air went stiff like the walls themselves were listening. Sadhna sat back with that little half-smile, the kind that says, I knew you'd crack. The brother didn't move. The father didn't clear his throat. And Sumit? Sumit stayed planted in his chair, jaw locked, eyes glassy, chest barely rising like he was trying to disappear without anyone noticing. It was the kind of silence that doesn't mean peace. It means a storm has been living inside the room for years, and everybody's been pretending it's normal. You're watching drama live. I'm Sabrina. Hit subscribe and tell me in the comments right now. Should Jenny have walked out for good that day, or did she accidentally hand her power back to the same people who never wanted her there to begin with? Because what made that moment colder wasn't that it came after a screaming match or some huge betrayal. It happened during what was supposed to be a routine family meeting about the cafe, and that's the trick about control. It doesn't always explode. Sometimes it seeps quietly into the small stuff. Who speaks first? Who gets interrupted? Who has to apologize? Who sits where? Who's allowed to have an opinion without being punished for it? Jenny knew what that meeting really was. It wasn't a business update. It was a cornering, a calculated group confrontation wearing the disguise of family discussion. The real message wasn't, let's plan the cafe. The real message was, you either fall in line or you're in the way. And the most brutal part? Sumit didn't protect her. Not once. He didn't interrupt his mother when the voice got sharp. He didn't shut down his brother when he nodded along like it was a courtroom verdict. He didn't step between Jenny and the pylon. He didn't even stand when Jenny stood. And that's when Jenny realized something that hit harder than any insult ever could. Sumit wasn't frozen. He was fine. Because to him, that meeting looked like progress. A united family. Shared goals. A working system. For him, this was the dream. His wife and his parents under one roof, moving in the same direction, building something together. For Jenny, it was a trap. A room full of conditions she never agreed to. A marriage where love came second and loyalty had terms and fine print, and nobody bothered to tell her the rules until she broke them. When the person you married lets an entire room turn on you and calls it family bonding, you don't need to argue. You've already lost the moment he chose silence over you. And this wasn't the first time Jenny felt outnumbered. But this time felt different. This time she didn't cry. This time she didn't fight back. This time she didn't beg to be understood. She stood up because she had nothing left to prove. And when a woman hits that point, the point where she stops explaining, everything changes. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just final. And here's where the story gets darker. Because while Jenny was standing there with her whole life shaking inside her body, Sumit stayed seated. He didn't chase her. He didn't call her name. He didn't even look panicked. He looked around the room like someone calculating damage, like a man trying to measure what the fallout would cost him. Not emotionally. Not spiritually. Not, my wife is breaking. He was doing math. What happens to the plan now? Because this whole cafe situation, it wasn't just about money. It wasn't even about ambition. It was about image. It was about rebuilding his narrative. It was about proving something to his parents and proving something to the world. Get the family back under one roof. Launch the cafe. Rebrand as a responsible son. Rebuild respect. Use Jenny's patience as currency. And Jenny? Jenny was the fuel that kept that machine running. Her forgiveness. Her loyalty. Her constant willingness to swallow disrespect and call it culture. But when a woman reaches her limit, no blueprint survives. What Sumit called unity, Jenny experienced as suffocation. And when your survival becomes someone else's inconvenience, something inside you breaks in a way that doesn't heal with a conversation. She didn't slam the door. She didn't throw a glass. She didn't make a scene. She walked out quietly, and that's the worst kind of goodbye because it means she isn't trying to change anything anymore. She isn't trying to convince anyone. She isn't bargaining. She's done. And let's be honest, the reason this hits so hard is because Jenny isn't the type people expect to walk away. People expect Jenny to keep fighting. Keep adjusting. Keep trying to earn acceptance from a family that has never ever offered it freely. They expect Jenny to be grateful for crumbs. To be patient. To be understanding. To keep translating her pain into something polite so nobody has to feel uncomfortable. But that day, Jenny stopped translating. She said, I'm leaving like someone who finally heard herself think clearly for the first time in years. And if you're wondering why it happened during a cafe meeting, why then, why that moment? Here's why. Because the cafe wasn't just a business plan. It was a symbol. A symbol of who had power in that house. The cafe wasn't their dream. It was Sumit's dream, approved by his family, funded by their approval, built on Jenny's compliance. And the cafe meeting exposed the real hierarchy. Sumit's mother could raise her voice and nobody would challenge her. The brother could judge and nobody would question him. Sumit could sit silent and still be considered a good son. But Jenny had to be perfect just to be tolerated. And when she wasn't perfect, when she dared to disagree, suddenly she wasn't a wife. She was a problem, a foreign obstacle, a woman who doesn't understand, a woman who ruins peace. The meeting was never about the cafe. It was about putting Jenny back in her place. And the reason I'm saying that is because watch the pattern. Whenever Jenny tries to stand up for herself, the conversation instantly becomes about respect. Not respect for her feelings, respect for the family, respect for the mother, respect for the household. Respect becomes a weapon that only points one direction, and Sumit let it happen. Over and over. Because it benefited him. Because it kept his world stable. Because it allowed him to claim he was balancing two sides when really he was just letting Jenny absorb the impact so he wouldn't have to. And Jenny finally saw it. He wasn't trapped between two worlds. He was choosing the world that required the least sacrifice from him, so she sacrificed instead. She sacrificed comfort, dignity, security, even her own voice at times. And she called it love, because love was the only language she had left to justify the pain. But love that demands you disappear isn't love. It's a slow erasure. And that day, Jenny refused to be erased one more inch. Now the question is, where did she go? And what happened after she stepped out of that room? Because here's the part nobody talks about. Leaving the room is easy compared to what comes after. The aftermath. The emotional whiplash. The fear. The guilt. The sudden quiet where you realize your whole life has been noise you've been tolerating. And for Jenny, the next moments weren't just a dramatic exit. They were a test. Because the second you step out of the role they assigned you, they scramble to rewrite the story. They don't say, we hurt her. They say, she's unstable. They don't say, we pushed her. They say, she's disrespectful. They don't say, we cornered her. They say, she overreacted. And if you've ever been in a situation like that, you know exactly how it goes. The moment you protect yourself, they label you the villain. And that's exactly what started happening the second Jenny walked out, because inside that house, her leaving wasn't seen as pain, it was seen as defiance. And defiance is dangerous to people who survive by controlling the narrative. So what did Sumit do? Did he run after her? Did he finally choose her? Or did he sit there and let his family decide what Jenny's exit meant before she even made it down the hall? Because I'm telling you right now, Sumit's next move revealed everything. Not what he said on camera. Not what he promised later. His next instinct. His first reaction. That's where the truth lives. And in this story, the truth isn't just about a cafe, it's about a marriage built on delayed choices. A wife who kept waiting for a man to become brave. And a family that kept tightening the leash every time she tried to breathe. Now stay with me, because in Part 2, what happened after Jenny walked out matters more than the walkout itself, because exits don't scare people who rely on control, aftermath does. Inside that room, the silence didn't break with concern. It shifted into strategy. Sadhna didn't call after her. She didn't ask if Jenny was okay. She leaned back like someone who just watched a move she'd been anticipating. That smirk wasn't accidental. It was confirmation. Confirmation that pressure works. Confirmation that if you push long enough, the outsider will remove herself and save the family the trouble of looking cruel. The brother stayed quiet because silence is agreement when power is already decided. And Sumit finally moved, but not toward the door. He exhaled. That small breath told the real story. Relief mixed with panic. Relief because confrontation had ended without him choosing sides. Panic because the plan had a crack in it. The cafe meeting had a script. Everyone had a role. Jenny's role was compliance dressed up as partnership. Smile. Nod. Absorb tone. translate disrespect into misunderstanding. When she stood up, she tore the script in half. And that's why Sadhna's smirk mattered. Because this wasn't about the cafe. It never was. The cafe was leverage. A shared project sounds equal until you ask who owns what, who decides hours, who controls money, who answers to whom. Jenny wasn't being invited into ownership. She was being folded into obligation. A foreign wife becomes useful when her labor is framed as love and her silence is framed as respect. That meeting was the moment they tried to lock the structure in place. Roles defined. Lines drawn. Authority established. And Sumit let it happen because ambiguity benefits him. As long as nothing is explicit, he can promise Jenny one thing and allow his family another. He survives in the blur. But Jenny didn't blur that day. She drew a line. And the line terrified them. Because once a woman names what's happening, the room can't pretend anymore. After she left, the narrative machine turned on instantly. Not on camera, off it. The language shifted. She's emotional. She misunderstood. This is cultural. Notice how those phrases erase responsibility. Nobody asks why she felt cornered. Nobody asks why she stood alone. They ask why she reacted. That's how control protects itself, by reframing pain as instability. And Sumit participated. Not loudly. Subtly. By not correcting the version being formed without her. By letting his mother define what Jenny's exit meant. By choosing the easier path again. Because chasing Jenny would have required a public choice. Standing up would have required a private rebellion. And Sumit has always postponed courage until tomorrow. Jenny knew